Chapter 41 9 Heavenly Treasures. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jian Yixue didn't say anything after hearing his words. She was silent with a cold expression. However, for a moment, Qin Yuan could see the doubt on her face. Qin Yuan also did not continue to speak, only continued to stare at her while trying to feel the strangeness in her body. 10 seconds. 30 seconds. 1 minute. Qin Yuan didn't feel anything, but Jian Yixue seemed to be starting to get annoyed by his gaze. What do you want? She asked. Her voice sounded slightly trembling even though her expression was still calm. Qin Yuan thought she would blush if he teased her a little. He didn't answer right away, but ordered the system, remove the seal please. Ding, order accepted. 1,000 karma points used to remove the seal. The owner of the seal will not notice that the seal has been removed. Karma points. 17,900. Qin Yuan looked at Jian Yixue again and said, "Okay, miss, now you can say it." What did you say? Jian Yixue was quickly taken aback but didn't look like she was confused. Am I not clear enough or do you want to join them? Qin Yuan took a step closer to her, causing her to take a step back to maintain some distance. She was starting to look worried, obviously she was starting to realize that he knew but didn't dare say it because it would kill her. Subconsciously, she once again took a step back. Maybe dying in battle wasn't scary to her, but in a situation like this, even the bravest would feel uncomfortable. I.e. Qin Yuan sighed, appearing directly in front of her. He grabbed her chin and pushed it slightly up so that her neck tightened. Do you think the seal is stronger than my strength? It was already broken when I came, he said. Hearing that, Jian Yixue's eyes widened for a moment. Is that true? She subconsciously asked with a doubtful expression. She tried to look down to see her body, so Qin Yuan removed her chin so she could do it. Of course, she didn't find anything because she couldn't even sense the existence of the seal other than a moment after she left that strange place. Come on, you've seen how strong I am. The divine continent which is the birthplace of emperors can be destroyed because of my strength, Qin Yuan said, boasting a little. Oh, better show me your memory straight away, he added. Jian Yixue's doubts seemed to have cleared. She took a deep breath and raised her index finger. Spiritual energy then gathered above that finger. Jian Yixue looked at her body again. Seeing nothing happen, she ended up expending more energy. Whoosh! A spiritual screen was formed, showing the reflection of Jian Yixue's figure in the mirror. Her figure after bathing and wearing new clothes looked twice as charming. Qin Yuan couldn't help but glance at her, which she responded by looking the other way. And why did you start here? Qin Yuan asked in a low voice. Perhaps because of holding back embarrassment, Jian Yixue took a deep breath and looked at him. That's where it started, she replied in a cold tone that seemed forced. Right after she said that, the reflection of her figure turned backwards so that what the spiritual screen showed also changed. Upon seeing the appearance of gray smoke, Qin Yuan's expression also became serious while his hand held his chin. Over time, his serious expression began to become interested. The moment he saw the figure on the throne called the dragon, thoughts of someone from Earth couldn't help but appear in his mind. Perhaps he should have thought more carefully, like what if he was the 7-path Great Emperor? But as a supreme being, his perception was much sharper. Just from the vibration of that person's voice and the sound of his breathing, he could immediately tell that his cultivation was still at the sovereign realm, weaker than the others. Jian Yixue could basically kill him with a single glance. First the goddess of ice, and now this person. It seems this isn't a world where everything revolves around me. And it. Compared to that figure, Qin Yuan was more interested in the place. He wasn't really confused because in his memory there was such a thing, including the words hidden heaven. Whoosh! He took out a thin book that was almost shattered. The cover of the book has a title. 9 Heavenly Treasures. This is a book that Qin Yuan obtained in an ancient place, which contains information about the 9 heavenly treasures which is said to appear at the same time as the appearance of the heavens. In fact, not a single heavenly treasure had ever appeared in the history of the divine world. In other words, no one has ever found it. Of course, there was still the possibility of someone possessing one of the 9 heavenly treasures but never revealing it. If any of them did appear, a great war would definitely break out over it. It was precisely because of this that his robbery yesterday attracted a lot of attention, as some people suspected that he had the treasure. Qin Yuan opened one of the pages. There was the inscription "Hidden Heaven." "So this is it," said Qin Yuan. "According to the description of the book, this is the most hidden treasure. This treasure holder could hide even from the heaven strike and be impossible to find unless he himself showed himself. And another ability is to summon other people into the treasure, just like what happened to Jian Yixue. It's just, what about the missions and points that person gave? I hope it's not a system like mine." According to his own analysis, he was more certain it was part of the treasure. Maybe something arranged by the previous owner, considering that there were many corpses of mighty creatures within the treasure. Qin Yuan didn't mind other people possessing such a treasure, but if someone else had a system like his, he couldn't help but be uncomfortable. Feelings of selfishness are unavoidable in a situation like this. One always wants to be the only one. To be honest, I'm not that interested in the treasure, as its abilities don't seem to be for combat. But at the very least, I need to keep an eye on that person. Finding him and then doing something to him, Qin Yuan had no interest in spending his time doing that, he preferred to develop himself. But in the end, he didn't know if he was the enemy or not. Even if he is a friend, it is still better to know more about him. Qin Yuan then looked at Jian Yixue, who was staring at the book in his hands curiously. "Miss, you can be considered to have made a great contribution," said Qin Yuan. He handed the book to her. Even though it was just an ordinary book, Jian Yixue held it as if she was holding a treasure. She quickly read it while Qin Yuan continued to think. Chapter 42, The Goddess of Ice's Thoughts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jian Yixue's forehead creased several times as she read the book. Perhaps this was also the first time she had heard of something called heavenly treasures. After she finished reading the book, she looked at Qin Yuan. "Can I still enter that place?" "It should still be possible, because that person and even the treasure won't notice that the seal has been removed. Just to be sure. Let's wait for the next meeting." "I see." Jian Yixue was silent for a while and then asked again, "If I can come back, is there something you want me to do later at the next meeting?" Hearing her taking the initiative to do something for him, Qin Yuan couldn't help but smile in satisfaction. "Yeah, just tell them your background. If that person gives you some kind of mission, act as if you thought about it." "All right." She nodded but still continued, "Actually I still have doubts, is what came to that place really my real body? I don't feel any difference at all. Would you believe me if I said that everything would be fine?" Qin Yuan replied with a question and a faint smile. Of course, he already knew the answer. What entered was actually just a clone made by the hidden heaven. Only because Jian Yixue is still weak, so it can imitate her strength. He made that conclusion because if Jian Yixue's body suddenly disappeared from Eternal Star City, the city's security formation would definitely notice it. Jian Yixue was silent for a moment before turning around. "I'm just asking, do you think I overestimated myself so much that I thought a great person like you would use me for your benefit?" she replied, somewhat sarcastically. "Miss, you are too sensitive." Qin Yuan chuckled. Right after he said that, he picked up one of her hair which happened to have been cut and was almost blown off by the wind. "What are you doing?" She turned again and pouted. Qin Yuan did not immediately respond, he surveyed the hair in his hand. Her black hair was a little grayish. If you looked closely, it might be obvious if it was in a hot place. "I think it's better if you make it brighter," said Qin Yuan while looking at her. "Didn't you see it?" she suddenly asked, leaving Qin Yuan confused for a moment. Whoosh! She stroked her hair. The gray-black color suddenly turned bright gray, just as Qin Yuan suggested. So the original color of your hair. Qin Yuan paused and finally looked at her hair with his strength. He quickly concluded. The black color was indeed the original color of her hair, but it changed by itself, becoming almost white but stopping at a light gray color. It was something that only happened because of extreme pain or suffering. Since you think it's better, I will continue to use it, Jian Yishue said. After saying that, she leapt into the lush trees, chasing after the retreating beasts. Looking at her rapidly disappearing back, Qin Yuan sighed. One born with the supreme innate sword should not suffer unless. Qin Yuan did not take long to deduce her past. In the end, it wasn't a rare case. When the sound of battle sounded again, he stepped into his palace, appearing directly on his throne. The days passed without much ripple. Qin Yuan spent more of his time relaxing in his palace. He actually wanted to take a walk to look for disciples, but he couldn't go because he needed to wait for a response from the Ice Palace. He often wondered if the goddess of ice was indeed from Earth, would she be angry with the messages he sent? The problem is, how can someone from Earth be so cold? Oh, if Ahei's angry, I hope Ahei doesn't do something to my Desclype and daughter. They were also in the Land of Snow, to be more precise in its central region called the Land of Ancient Snow. It's an ancient mysterious place that's perfect for training the immune system. They trained there in preparation for robbing divinity later. Even though he had warned them, they still didn't leave. It's not because they're being unreasonable. But if something bad did happen, they would still be able to escape with the help of the accumulated energy he had instilled in their bodies before he was injured. Even the goddess of ice wouldn't be able to catch up to them when the energy was active. Meanwhile, in the ice palace, the goddess of snow once again came to the gods of ice's room. The situation was still the same as before, there was no one in the room except for the sound of splashing water from the bathroom. Sis, the goddess of snow called out. We're not going to attack the eternal star, replied the figure in the bathroom, leaving the goddess of snow confused. She thought it was because of the previous letter. Taking a breath, she then asked, Sis, what exactly is so special about this eternal star ancestor? You won't understand even if I tell you. Then shall we just be silent? There are many who heard me say you would come to his place to teach him a lesson. If we don't come, people will question our reputation. Ling Xue, it looks like you've lived too long, the goddess of ice replied, making the goddess of snow even more confused because her words sounded like she was being sarcastic on her. Sis, please enlighten me. She didn't dare to insist anymore. Remember what I told you when we were young. When we were young. The goddess of snow began to think. Many things that she had forgotten about for a long time reappeared, all of them seemed to be a scene playing out in front of her. Suddenly, she remembered one important word from her sister. Don't think I'm just an unreasonable woman who will fight anyone who annoys me. Yes, I am, but that's only if I believe the person I'm fighting can't harm me. Sis, are you saying that the eternal star ancestor is very dangerous? She couldn't help but be surprised because even the figures who were recognized as the most powerful in the divine world she didn't perceive as existences that threatened her. I don't know, replied the goddess of ice. In the divine world, when you know nothing about another person, it means that person is a danger to you. The goddess of snow understood that, so she didn't ask anymore. But if you can bring him into this palace, we can teach him a lesson because I want to do that too, said the goddess of ice again. Sis, don't joke, who dares to come to this palace? There was a great emperor who once dared to enter, and as a result he almost died. From then on, people knew the so-called ice palace was no ordinary palace. Since you know that, hold on to your grudge. For now, keep an eye on news about him. Whatever it is, tell me. All right. Chapter 43 Second Meeting. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Qin Yuan obviously didn't expect that the notorious goddess of ice was such a cautious character. His wait finally yielded nothing. Perhaps the goddess' injuries are much more severe, or she has other matters to attend to, he thought. He also didn't want his attention to be focused solely on it. Of course, he didn't think those two things were the only reason. Just in case, he sent orders to his spies around the ice palace to do more surveillance. Today, the day of the meeting of the Hidden Heaven sect finally arrived. Qin Yuan did not meet Jian Yixue, only watched her from his throne secretly. The woman is sitting in her room. When the time came, Qin Yuan saw the surrounding gray smoke. This time it was so thin that it was barely visible. Its aura was also very ordinary. Even if Jian Yixue walked in a crowd of experts, no one would find it strange. One might just think it was smoke that was generated from Jian Yixue's energy or from certain useless objects. I didn't even find any gaps to enter. It's also like one with nature, as if it didn't exist in the first place, Qin Yuan said. Immediately after that Jian Yixue's eyes closed. And indeed, her body is still there. Qin Yuan stopped watching after confirming she was fine. He still had enough morals. There was no way he could keep an eye on a woman in his room for an hour. One more month before I attack the Buddhist Holy Land. Well, it looks like my name will be the most talked about in this generation. He stood up, walked towards one of the palace balconies. He had only been standing there for 3 minutes. Su Mei suddenly appeared behind him, directly hugging his waist. The soft sensation of her breasts pressing against his back quickly made his breath heat up. Qin Yuan turned around and instantly grabbed her waist with one hand while the other held her buttocks. What's wrong? Happy face carrot, he asks her, which she responds with pouting lips. Of course, Qin Yuan knew why she was showing such an expression. In this 1 month, he did nothing to her because he was worried about the arrival of the goddess of ice. Now it seemed she couldn't take it anymore. As my husband, aren't you supposed to feed me? She replied. Oh, yes, you're right. But the way I feed a fox is different, said Qin Yuan. I don't care how, the important thing is that I can be full. Qin Yuan did not say anything else. He carried her in his lap and carried her to his room. At the same time, Qian Suyun had just entered the palace grounds. The clothes she wore today were quite simple, and she even brought a basket filled with various kinds of groceries. She was followed by a young woman wearing a maid outfit. Coincidentally, she and the young woman saw Qin Yuan hugging Su Mei on the balcony before they disappeared. Qian Suyun didn't show any expression, but the young woman stomped her foot on the ground. Really, a female fox? I still don't know how she got here in the first place. She should have lived on that barbarian continent with those barbarian creatures, she said. Even though her words were extremely disrespectful, Qian Suyun just kept quiet, not rebuking her at all. Come on, focus on our work, don't be distracted by trivial things like this, Qian Suyun said before continuing on her way. In the room, hugging Su Mei with one arm, Qin Yuan lowered her skirt until her buttocks were exposed. It couldn't be denied that her buttocks were truly incredibly beautiful and charming, making her lust reach peaks every time he saw them. He gently stroked them from top to bottom and from left to right. Husband, said Su Mei spoiledly. It wasn't clear what she meant, but her expression was like she wanted more as she started to take off his clothes. Qin Yuan responded by doing the same. Before they even reached the bed, they were finally completely naked. Seeing Su Mei's curvy figure, Qin Yuan couldn't help but gulp his saliva. He quickly embraced her, touching every part of her body. Let's play fox. Style, Qin Yuan whispered beside her ear while groping her breasts. Hearing his words, Su Mei's face became very red. She seemed to feel embarrassed. Qin Yuan finally pushed her onto the bed. Meanwhile, Jian Yixue found 2 additional people in the Hidden Heaven. From their movements, it was clear they weren't new members, but members who weren't present at the previous meeting. One woman and one man. The woman has the title, Flower, while the man has the title, Assassin. Jian Yixue didn't pay attention to them as her instincts told them they were also weak. She calmly sat down on her chair. I thought you wouldn't come, said the dragon to Jian Yixue. Since she already knew that he was only a sovereign, 2 realms below her, Jian Yixue barely showed him any respect, so the others looked annoyed. I think I can find a good opportunity here, Jian Yixue replied. The dragon nodded, that's for sure. He then started a discussion. The topic this time was about the immortal Crow Emperor and the battle between the Eternal Star Ancestor and the Eternal Tree Ancestor. 1 month was more than enough for the 2 stories to reach them. The dragon seemed to be very interested in the immortal Crow Emperor, but the others somehow preferred to talk about the 2 peak experts fighting. Oh, I heard that the sky of the divine continent became a dense forest when the Eternal Tree Ancestor unleashed his power, said the monkey in a hoarse voice but still expressing his admiration. Yes, but he immediately retreated when the stars of the Eternal Star Ancestor came. The sky disappeared at that time, added the snake. It seemed that he liked the Eternal Star Ancestor more. It wasn't long before the debate broke out. One group said the Eternal Star Ancestor was stronger while the other said the Eternal Tree Ancestor was stronger. Chapter 44. The time has come. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In that debate, even the dragon couldn't help but express his opinion. Here, even though he seemed very mysterious, he wasn't trying to give the impression of an expert, he was just acting as if he was a little better than the others and could give them a big chance. Jian Yixue, on the other hand, didn't react at all no matter what they said. Miss Sword, you don't seem interested at all. The dragon, who could see Jian Yixue's face, said. Jian Yixue glanced at him and replied, I have no interest in discussing giants with the ants. How arrogant, who do you think you are to say that? The flower scolded. You don't understand anything. Jian Yixue didn't even glance at her as she answered. The dragon seemed to have guessed something. He couldn't help but ask, Miss, it seems you know more. I see it. What do you see? The rabbit asked subconsciously as she couldn't help but think about the fight. Seeing everything you guys talked about, Jian Yixue replied calmly, bringing the atmosphere into silence. The flower probably opened her mouth in surprise. After a while, the rabbit continued, it seems your background is very strong. Jian Yixue didn't respond anymore. The dragon looked thoughtful and finally asked, Miss, can you tell us your background? Of course, if you mind, saying the place where you live is fine too. All gazes were on Jian Yixue. The others seemed curious about her background even though they didn't like her. Jian Yixue thought for a while and finally said, my name is Jian Yixue, the supreme disciple of Heaven Smiting Sect. Cough. Several people coughed and choked at the same time from being too shocked. The dragon didn't make any sound, but the smoke around him seemed almost chaotic, indicating that he was also surprised. After that, he fell silent as if in thought. Nearly 3 hours later, Qin Yuan lay down with a satisfied expression, hugging Su Mei, who looked like she wanted to bury herself into his body. Her breath was warm and soft, making its own sensation as it hit his body. However, they had only calmed down for a few minutes. The fragrant aroma of various dishes suddenly entered their room. Su Mei pouted for a moment, but then sat down. Husband, let's eat, she said. There was no way she didn't know that Qian Suyun was cooking, but she didn't mind. Qin Yuan thought she had other ideas to mentally attack Qian Suyun. Of course, there was no way he wouldn't go because Qian Suyun was obviously cooking for him. Let's take a shower first, he replied. When they came out of the room, Qin Yuan and Su Mei couldn't help but be surprised. They saw Jian Yixue on the way to their room. Why are you here? And who allowed you to come here? Su Mei directly asked 2 questions with a furrowed brow. Jian Yixue didn't seem to have guessed that this was Qin Yuan's room either. While trying to remain calm, she replied, I have something important to report and Madame Qian sent me here. She looked at Qin Yuan while Su Mei snorted. That woman, she stomped on the floor before stepping away after glancing at Jian Yixue once. Qin Yuan signaled for Jian Yixue to follow him. After a few steps, he asked, "So what happened?" "I did as you instructed, but the dragon hasn't done anything. I think he's a bit worried after finding out I live around so many experts." "I see. Maybe now he's wondering if the seal is strong enough to outwit me." "What conclusion do you think he will draw?" "In the end he'll think I can't because it's not something even a great emperor can detect," Qin Yuan replied. "But you can." "Oh, you don't seem to know yet." Qin Yuan looked at her with a strange smile. He did not forbid the Purple Ocean Dragon and the directionless monk from telling his fellow sect members that he had robbed the divinity. Perhaps the Holy Sword Emperor would know by now. What? Jian Yixue was confused. Qin Yuan snapped his fingers. A light appeared and entered Jian Yixue's forehead. The woman knitted her brows, but soon after that she was so shocked that her eyes almost widened. "You? How did you do it?" she subconsciously asked, to which Qin Yuan responded with a faint smile. Even so, she calmed down more quickly. After taking a breath, Eihei stepped into the passage they happened to pass. Qin Yuan thought she got motivated after knowing what he could do. Not long after, Qin Yuan and Su Mei arrived at the dining room. The dining table there was now filled with various sumptuous dishes. Su Mei pulled Qin Yuan's hand and sat down directly. After that, she looked at Qian Suyun who was still putting down some dishes with her maid. "Thank you for preparing so many dishes for us. I'll probably think of you as my little sister if you keep at it," she said as she took a piece of meat and elegantly stuffed it into her mouth. Qian Suyun. Days passed again without any major events. Soon the time to attack the Buddhist Holy Land arrived. Qin Yuan, followed by the Holy Sword Emperor and the Purple Ocean Dragon, flew towards the west. The directionless monk, on the other hand, didn't go with them because he didn't want to go there. Even though he had already been expelled from the Buddhist Holy Land, it was in the end still his birthplace, and the place where he grew up. Qin Yuan also didn't think it was right for him to attack his own house, so he didn't force him to come along. At full speed, he and the others did not take too long to arrive at the borders of the eastern domain. There was an ocean that seemed boundless. From above it looked calm, there were only small waves. And in fact, it was indeed not a dangerous place. The giant fish there don't attack passers-by as long as they don't dive into the water. There are many islands on that side of the ocean. Each island does not look like an island because it is full of buildings that make up a city. From above, they looked more like cities floating on the ocean. Countless flying arcs came out of those cities, each carrying a large number of people. Qin Yuan and the others did not descend into those cities, they just stood in the air and occasionally looked to the east, waiting for the Sky Butterfly Queen to arrive. Chapter 45. Gather. You are listening at novelfull.audio. They didn't have long to wait. They hadn't even talked about anything and an angel-like figure entered their view. She looked to be in her 30s, much like Qin Yuan. She was tall with a very slender build and snow-white skin. Her hair was silver, slightly bluish, in a bun but not very neat. The off-shoulder dress she was wearing was the same color. Every time she took a step, the slit of her dress opened slightly, revealing her long, slender, white legs. Of course, like Xia Jieyu, she also had a pair of beautiful wings on her back that somehow gave off a feeling as if they could cover the world. They also appear to have been created from the wind, but are much denser and have white feathers on them. This is a supreme woman, a beauty that can overshadow the world. While Qian Suyun and Su Mei were extremely beautiful, if they were to stand beside this woman, they would seem like side characters. It's not that her beauty is above them, but it's as if there is another evolution of that beauty. They need a breakthrough to have such beauty. With every step he took, she crossed 100 continents. The world itself seemed to have prepared a special path for her so that she could travel faster than others. Soon she arrived in front of Qin Yuan and the others. Looking closely, she was much prettier. Qin Yuan couldn't help but stare at her in such detail that every strand of her hair didn't escape his gaze. She looked at him too. Her expression was not cold, one could even say quite gentle and calm, but it looked so dignified, that anyone who saw it would naturally not dare to disrespect her. Sky Butterfly Queen, long time no see. Qin Yuan was the first to say hello. He was actually a bit awkward as it was his first time meeting another woman who could be said to be his equal, perhaps even better because a saint ancestor had the lowest status among the three. The Sky Butterfly Queen's brows moved slightly when she heard his voice. Her light blue eyes with long but thin eyebrows then looked straight into his eyes. It seems that the last time I saw you, you weren't like this. Is that what makes your courage rise? She asked. The two men behind Qin Yuan did not understand what she meant. Qin Yuan, who knew that she was protesting the words he conveyed through her daughter, responded with a faint smile. So what's your impression after seeing the difference? He asked back, even blinking his eyes where only she could see it. 27,050 charm points, almost triple his previous charm points. He couldn't help but wonder if that number was enough to affect a supreme woman like this Butterfly Queen. Upon hearing that question, her light blue eyes flashed a light for a moment, changing the color of the world for a split second. She then said, I invite you to cooperate. If you have other goals, you better leave now, I can find a replacement. Qin Yuan cleared his throat but still smiled. He thought it was a pretty subtle response. What he meant, even though she seemed to be refusing, she still responded, not ignoring him at all. Perhaps such a response would mean nothing if it came from an ordinary woman, but she was a supreme woman. Even her refusal must have had a very deep meaning. Perhaps she had a good impression when she saw his current figure. Shall we go now? Qin Yuan asked. No, wait for one more person, she replied, causing Qin Yuan to knit his brows. He thought it was just the two of them. Seeing his thoughts, Sky Butterfly Queen continued, the Buddhist Holy Land got one additional Buddha, I just found out too. There is one more Buddha. Did someone break through? Qin Yuan couldn't help but be surprised. During this time, the Buddhist Holy Land only had two Buddhas, both of whom were eternal saint ancestors because everyone who walked the Buddha path had to take the saint path. If the Buddhist Holy Land had one more Buddha, it would mean they had three eternal saint ancestors. Their combined strength must be terrifying. No one broke through, the Sky Butterfly Queen replied. This is Eternal Mountain Ancestor, he decided to change his path. The fact that it was someone else who joined the Buddhist Holy Land was something Qin Yuan had already expected. There was no shortage of saint ancestors joining them. But Eternal Mountain Ancestor. This was actually the Eternal Mountain Ancestor of the God clan. Whoosh! A beam of light flew very fast from the east. If you look closely, it's actually a very white sword. The length is about 1.5 meters including the hilt. It had two blades and an extremely sharp edge, giving off a feeling as if it could redeem the center of the world. Shwa! It stopped in front of Qin Yuan and the others, producing a sword humming sound. What happened? The people downstairs wondered as they found their ears bleeding. They looked up at the sky but found nothing. Only a few experts faintly sensed something and it made their hearts tremble with fear. Sword-hearted Great Emperor, Qin Yuan said in a low voice when he saw the sword. The sword did not turn into a human, it remained in its sword form because for a long time, this great emperor had always been like this, leaving the human body, only using the sword body. People have long forgotten his face. Even the gender is quite doubtful. Although the opinion that he was a male was more widely accepted, it was only because most men who walked the way of the sword couldn't accept that it was a woman who had the highest attainments on that path. Actually, it's also not important because he's the type who doesn't care about gender anymore. To him, he was a sword and a sword had no gender. Chapter 46 Arriving in the Western Domain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While Qin Yuan was staring at him, he could feel gazes from him even though his sword body had no eyes. Eternal Star. He actually did call him. In response, he put on an expression as if he was saying, "What?" Given that he had helped the Holy Sword Emperor when he attacked him, he was naturally unable to be friendly to him even though he claimed it was because the Holy Sword Emperor had contributed to the way of the sword. In the end, it was quite dangerous for him. It was a different case to what Jian Yixue did at that time. An ant is trying to do something to a giant. In the eyes of the giant, it was just a funny thing. Besides, it's hard to be friendly to a sword. Earlier I was interested in having the granddaughter of the Holy Sword as my disciple, replied the sword-hearted great emperor. Hearing that, the Holy Sword Emperor blinked and frowned at the same time. Qin Yuan, on the other hand, remained calm. He said, "So. I want it now." "Oh. Do you just have to say it just because you want someone else's sect disciple?" He couldn't help but say sarcastically after hearing his wish. "You don't know anything about swords, there's nothing she can get from you other than a few little things." "Ha!" Qin Yuan snorted lightly. "One needs one's own path to reach the top. You might be able to teach her so she grows faster, but what? At most she will only live under your shadow. There's no need to tell me that, I naturally have my ways." "Alright, you two, stop arguing, do that after we finish our goal," the Sky Butterfly Queen cut in. Qin Yuan looked at him before looking at the sword-hearted great emperor again. He said, "You can ask her yourself." The sword didn't respond anymore, there was only a low snort. Of course, in a buzzing tone. As Jian Yixue's grandfather, the Holy Sword Emperor seemed unhappy to see two people fighting over Jian Yixue without even asking his opinion. Unfortunately, no one cared about him except the Purple Ocean Dragon. He patted his back while shaking his head. Here, they can only act as spectators. Seeing Qin Yuan and the sword-hearted great emperor no longer arguing, the Sky Butterfly Queen finally took a step into that ocean. She took the lead not only because it was her idea, but because she excelled at controlling the wind. Under her leadership, their one step was several times further. The islands beside the ocean quickly disappeared. The number of flying arcs only became more and more the further they went. Some ended up turning north and south. If they went north, they would arrive at the central domain, which was the widest domain in the divine world. After it passed through that domain, they would arrive at the northern domain. As for the south, will lead directly to the southern domain. Qin Yuan and the others, on the other hand, continued to head west. There were several continents in the middle of that ocean, but they had no inhabitants, only the forest above them. Of course, that's only when viewed from above. If you dive into the ocean, you will realize that the continents are on the backs of turtles and other similar animals. Who knows what the Sky Butterfly Queen was thinking? She suddenly extended her hand to one of the turtles. Rumble. Space rumbled as her slender and delicate hand pierced through spacetime, appearing directly on the turtle's back. Her palm remained normal, it was invisible compared to the turtle, but she easily grabbed it before pulling it away. Whoosh! The turtle appeared in front of her. Its head then popped out of its shell, it covered the sky in front of Qin Yuan and the others. The turtle involuntarily opened its mouth in surprise, producing a thunder-like roar. "Who are you guys?" it quickly asked as it realized the situation. Even though JT wasn't a spiritual beast that could take on a human form, it could still speak human language. The Sky Butterfly Queen didn't answer, she pointed her index finger at the turtle. Wind gathered above the finger before forming a tornado. It then flew towards the turtle. When it reached the tortoise, it had already become 1,000 times bigger than the tortoise, so the tortoise looked small even though it was carrying a continent on its back. Whoosh! The tornado then flew east, carrying the tortoise. Qin Yuan, What the Sky Butterfly Queen didn't actually stop their journey, but she continued to do so. It didn't take long before she caught more than 10,000 turtles and sent them east. Perhaps now the eastern domain was in a commotion because of the thousands of giant tortoises carried by the tornadoes from the ocean. The Sky Butterfly Queen only stopped when they arrived at a place where there was an enormous vortex in front of them. There were many arcs around the vortex, but they didn't dare get too close. "It's gotten bigger," Qin Yuan said in a low voice as he recalled about the vortex. "Very mysterious, probably created by a formation," said the Sky Butterfly Queen with narrowed eyes. "But it's not something we need to worry about now, let's continue," she said again before continuing on her way. Qin Yuan was the last to move and he didn't immediately take his eyes off the vortex even though he was already moving. It was called the Unknown Vortex because it was indeed completely unknown. Unlike a mysterious ancient place that existed before civilization began, it appeared recently. No one knows for sure where it ends because no one ever reaches the end. Qin Yuan himself was injured there, which was why he took the place so seriously. Western Domain, this is where the Buddhist Holy Land is located. The unique thing about this domain was that all of the 5 supreme experts were composed entirely of eternal saint ancestors. Neither great emperors nor primordial beasts were here. The eternal tree ancestor and the 2 Buddhas were 3 of them. After a long journey, Qin Yuan and the others finally arrived at this domain. What greeted them here was a continent stretching from north to south. This continent was bigger than his continent, so Qin Yuan couldn't help but observe it, admiring the various creatures that lived on this continent. Unfortunately, this is the continent on the border, the spiritual energy is rather thin. There were no sufficiently strong experts based here. The entire continent was basically dominated by countless small factions and they were always fighting for more territory. "We will use the portal from here, lest the old men notice our arrival so quickly," said the Sky Butterfly Queen before stepping to a large city in the center of the continent. It's a city flanked by green mountains. Apparently there was a formation within the city, rendering people unable to fly even around it. Those who wished to enter the city had to struggle across the mountains. Of course, the formation was unable to affect Qin Yuan and the others. But because they were worried that there was a certain hidden power in the formation, so they ended up choosing the same method as the others. They landed outside those mountains where there were many great roads. "Hey guys, do you guys need a ride?" A young man riding a buffalo shouted. The buffalo was followed by 10 other buffalo and they pulled a carriage large enough to accommodate 100 people but still empty now. While it wasn't luxurious, it wasn't bad either. While approaching them, the young man observed them closely. He was unable to see their divine appearance. In his eyes, they were like any other ordinary person. But with his experience of bringing various guests from far away, he could still faintly sense that they were special. The figure of the sword-hearted great emperor completely in the shape of a sword caught his attention more than anyone else. Of course, he didn't think too far, he just thought it was the sword of one of them. He was intrigued because he thought it was very good. Neither of them turned down his offer. Qin Yuan and the Sky Butterfly Queen nodded. Whoosh! The great sword-hearted emperor flew straight into the carriage, he stabbed into the wall before calming down. People who saw him might think he was just an ordinary sword. After him, only then did the Sky Butterfly Queen climb into the carriage. Qin Yuan followed behind her before the Holy Sword Emperor and the Purple Ocean Dragon. If anyone found out that they were boarding a carriage together, it would probably become a hot topic in the divine world. The Sky Butterfly Queen sat by the window with a table in front of her. On the other side of the table was also a chair. Qin Yuan thought for a while and finally sat down on the chair with an expression as if it was nothing. The Sky Butterfly Queen who had just sat down couldn't help but knit her brows. "You can't choose another seat?" she asked. Hey, we're now using someone else's business. Other chairs for other customers. If each of us sits at one table, isn't that too much? We might be able to pay more, but that's a redundant trait. The Sky Butterfly Queen. Chapter 47 Western Continent. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. What nonsense are you saying? Asked the Sky Butterfly Queen. Right after that, several people got into the carriage. They sat closely together, not taking a table for each of them. I mean, shouldn't we act like commoners here? Qin Yuan replied. Up to you. The queen didn't seem to want to argue. She gave a glance before crossing her legs. Between her movements, her thighs were visible for a moment through the slit of her dress. Qin Yuan still wanted to chat. He held his chin, pretended to think about something and finally said, Queen, are so-called supreme women really not willing to open their hearts? He purposely used the plural so that he didn't look like he was asking her personal thoughts even though that was what he wanted. His words startled the Holy Sword Emperor and the Purple Ocean Dragon who were sitting quite a distance away but could hear his voice clearly. The Sky Butterfly Queen, who had just leaned back, on the other hand, couldn't help but straighten up again in her sitting position. She then looked into his eyes with a deep look. This seems to be a very sensitive question. Who knows if this question has ever been asked of those supreme women? Surprisingly, the Sky Butterfly Queen didn't say anything in that sitting position. She leaned back again before finally speaking. It's not that they don't want to, but you need higher qualifications. Why do you think I have a daughter? Her delicate lips curved slightly as she said that. Qin Yuan couldn't help but be surprised by her question. At this moment, he even felt the sword-hearted great emperor's gaze upon the Sky Butterfly Queen. Are you serious? Qin Yuan asked. There was no need to say it clearly because the meaning of her words was too obvious. And knowing it made him a little uncomfortable because he had imagined possessing her the moment he saw her in person. However, her curled lips were suddenly tightly shut. She turned her gaze to the window, rested her head on the palm of her hand, and replied, It was just a distant past, I had almost forgotten. Forget. Qin Yuan couldn't help but think deeply as he looked at the woman. Her origins are not very clear. No one knows what her past was like. It was the same for her clan. When they appeared, they were already very strong. Since the entire butterfly race also lived in seclusion, it was difficult to investigate them. Everything in the end only ends with the speculations of people who like to imagine. Now it can be concluded that she is probably a widow. Of course, Xia Jieyu's birth in this generation could not be considered strange as there was no shortage of women who had been pregnant for a very long time. Some purposely seal their fetuses so they don't grow at all. And she actually said it because I asked. Qin Yuan couldn't help but think strangely about it. Was it because of a woman's subconscious reaction in front of a man they thought was attractive? Ding, system has confirmed that the Sky Butterfly Queen is a widow. The reward you will get if you win her heart is reduced by 20%. You will only get 64,000 karma points and 21,300 charm points. The charm points you get are reduced because your charm points have exceeded 20,000. Wait, why is the prize winning a widow's heart 20% less? Qin Yuan felt like scolding the system. It was silent, not answering his question. By the time the carriage started climbing the mountains, there were already about 40 people. The atmosphere wasn't very calm as some people couldn't stop talking. Several times, the Sky Butterfly Queen looked uncomfortable because of the atmosphere. Fortunately, the buffalo that pulled their carriage ran very fast. The way they ran was also so immersive that there was no vibration in the carriage even though they passed through many potholes. In about an hour, they started descending the mountains and became faster. From there, the city was clearly visible either the top or the side. Maybe it's because different races live in this city, so the city's buildings are also very varied, making the city seem very unique. Along the way down the mountain range, there were many layers of formation which, although invisible, could be seen by the gigantic Qin Yuan. Quite a number of other formations are hidden, the people here are indeed the most cautious, said Qin Yuan. They might be able to detect them if they didn't suppress their strength completely. Things like this were a form of self-protection so that the arrival of every expert from another domain could be felt if they chose to use the portal. Perhaps every domain in the divine world was full of differences, but it was clearer between the domains. Conflicts were frequent, especially the expert-led factions of stages 6 through 8. If your territory is attacked suddenly because the enemy comes through the portal, even if you survive, your people may be slaughtered. This is often the case. Unfortunately, destroying the portal at the border has more disadvantages than advantages. The experts would be late in coming in case certain dangers came at the border. Soon the carriage arrived in front of the city gates. It stops there. Qin Yuan took a deep breath before standing up. When he and the others got off, the young man was already waiting outside. He was holding a bowl with the inscription, "You can pay voluntarily." With Qin Yuan's eyes, how could he not see that the words were just written? He was probably expecting something else. Qin Yuan felt he was good enough, but for the sake of safety, he paid like the others, not using the Saint Jade. The youth slightly pouted for a moment when he saw the amount he paid. Qin Yuan finally patted him on the shoulder and said, "Keep working hard, boy, don't expect anything instant because it actually dulls you. One word from a god can enlighten countless sentient beings." He thought he had given the young man far more than he had to give him a few Saint Jades. Without paying attention to the youth anymore, Qin Yuan and the others went to the city center where there was a field full of portals. There was one portal that was bigger than the others, and every one that came into the portal seemed to have a huge backdrop. Once in the field, the Sky Butterfly Queen looked at all of them one by one before stopping at the Holy Sword Emperor and the Purple Ocean Dragon. "I want the help of the two of you, so continue to follow me later." The Holy Sword Emperor only nodded lightly while the Purple Ocean Dragon respectfully replied, "Yes, Your Majesty." After that, the Sky Butterfly Queen looked at the Sword-Hearted Great Emperor. "We will destroy the gate of their warehouse together. Please unleash your strongest attack," she said. "I know," replied the Sword-Hearted Great Emperor in a nonchalant tone. The Sky Butterfly Queen then continued while looking at Qin Yuan. "You'll be guarding us for a while. Sword-Hearted will join you after the gate is destroyed while I go into the warehouse." "Queen, isn't it time you tell us where it is?" Qin Yuan answered with a question. There was no doubt that the other experts would surround them after finding out what they had stolen. Maybe those from other domains will also come. At that time, they had to rush to the location. "At least tell us which way we should go," the Sword-Hearted Great Emperor added. As if expecting their request, the Queen smiled faintly. After that, she took out 2 folded papers. Whoosh! Whoosh! She threw one each at Qin Yuan and the Sword-Hearted Great Emperor. "You'll get the information when I get the key." Although she spoke with a smile, that seemed to be H3 our final resolution. "Sky Butterfly Queen, you who rarely participate in the Divine Worlds competition seem sly too, huh?" Qin Yuan said as he tucked the paper into his pocket. "I don't, but you two are more likely to be treacherous than I am," replied the Queen. She then stepped towards the biggest portal. Behind the portal was yellow earth overgrown with trees that turned yellow like in autumn. But it definitely wasn't because of autumn, as the trees were full of very fresh-looking fruit. Even within the city where Qin Yuan and the others appeared, quite a number of trees could be found, their number almost equivalent to the number of buildings in the city. "Western continent," Qin Yuan said in a low voice. "It is one of the largest continents." As far as the eye could see, Qin Yuan saw quite a number of monks. There were a lot of ordinary people too, but here, they were very calm. Even in a crowd, not much sound is produced. Qin Yuan and the others did not observe the surroundings for too long. They nodded at each other before stepping into the air, appearing directly in the sky of the continent center. Chapter 48 Nirvana Temple. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The so-called Buddhist Holy Land couldn't be said to be a faction because it was the entire Western continent with many temples within it. In fact, there is no so-called faction among Buddhists. It might be more correct to say that all Buddhists are one single faction. At the center of the continent, there was a gigantic temple, shaped like a hill and surrounded by thousands of stone towers. Qin Yuan estimated it was 10 times bigger than the earth. Ordinary eyes definitely can't see the other side of the temple. The entire temple looked deserted, but outside the temple, there were countless monks and ordinary people. Among those ordinary people, there was no shortage of experts like the Saint Ancestor. Some meditated facing the temple, some prostrated themselves, and some just watched leisurely. This is the Nirvana Temple, the core of the Buddhist Holy Land. When talking about historically, the temple was actually older than all the monks in the divine world. It's one of those places that existed even before civilization began. So far, no damage has been seen. It looked deserted because there weren't many people living there, only a few were on duty to look after. The monks and the 2 Buddhas had their own temples and traveled frequently to spread the teachings of the Buddha. Overall, it can be said to be a place of pilgrimage for Buddhists. Due to the importance of the temple, various treasures owned by Buddhists are kept in the temple. The sky butterfly queen gazed at the temple with her piercing blue eyes. It was a gaze that could make even the eagles lose their nerve. It's there. She then pointed to one of the stone towers. After that, she looked at the Holy Sword Emperor and the Purple Ocean Dragon. There are some barriers and guards, you 2 destroy them first while we gather strength. But remember, don't kill anyone, we're only stealing here. The 2 nodded without saying anything. The Purple Ocean Dragon was the first to move. He transformed into his dragon figure the moment he appeared in front of the stone tower. Roar! His appearance was accompanied by a loud roar, reverberating across the continent. What happened? Countless eyes widened as they saw a huge dragon appear in the temple. Not even all the monks are qualified to enter the temple, how dare a dragon appear and roar there? Look! Someone pointed to the sky. There appeared 2 eyes like the sun, that was what ordinary people saw. The experts with heavenly eyes, on the other hand, saw a man standing with a sword in his hand. It's the Holy Sword Emperor. He was very famous because he was one of the strongest among the 9th stage, so the experts quickly recognized him. Is this an attack? It seems so. No, it's not just these 2 people. Someone with sharp senses suddenly said. When he said that, his body trembled as if he saw the most terrifying thing, confusing his friends. Is there one more powerful? Ask his friend. He shook his head, leaving them confused. T.3, N.1, he replied, making all of his friends tremble as well once they understood what he meant. One of them managed to calm down faster. He said, this will be a big disaster, run fast. Meanwhile, the sky butterfly queen took a deep breath. A light blue bow appeared in her hand. It was almost as long as her own body with flower carvings on each side. She then looked at Qin Yuan and said, Eternal Star, please hold on for a moment. After saying that, her body disappeared. It also happened to the sword-hearted great emperor. Whoosh! 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 One after another monks appeared in front of the Purple Ocean Dragon, their cultivations consisting of stages 4 to 8. The monk who was at the 8th stage with a calm expression said, Go. He and the others then sent their palms at the dragon. Each palm became extremely large. However, the dragon was still bigger. Roar! He roared again in response so that all the monks except for one who was at the 8th stage were flung in various directions. You are not my opponent, said the Purple Ocean Dragon in a majestic voice before sending his fist into the palm that was still heading towards him. Bang! Their collision generated a huge shockwave. It didn't affect the temple but through the weaklings who were outside the temple. The 8th stage monk managed to withstand the Purple Ocean Dragon's fist, but only for a second. After that, he was thrown off just like the others. Whoosh! The Holy Sword Emperor finally made his move. He charged towards the stone tower while 9 golden swords appeared behind him, turning the sky golden yellow. Amitba, my brother Holy Sword, please stop. Suddenly a voice full of wisdom resounded from a location within the temple. A holy golden light then gushed out from that location. After that, people saw the figure of a handsome young monk, wearing a yellow robe in that light. His eyes were like golden springs, constantly emitting golden light and illuminating the entire continent. After appearing, he immediately flew to the stone tower and stood in front of it. This is the 3rd golden bodhisattva, the 3rd disciple of the golden Buddha, the people said when they saw the young monk. Everyone who reaches the 9th stage is not called a monk anymore, they will be called a bodhisattva. Yes, the 9th stage of the battle, this will definitely shake the world, said a few juniors, getting excited without knowing that they could be reduced to ashes from a few remnants of the attack. You. The Holy Sword Emperor looked at him and then shook his head. Call your 2 senior brothers, the 3 of you may still not be able to stop me. His words shocked everyone. Even though they knew he was very strong, no one had thought that far. The 3rd golden bodhisattva did not appear to object. He replied, Amitba, my life and death are here, as long as I stand here, I have nothing to fear. Right after he said that, manifestations of various divine beings appeared around him. They were large and emitted a ferocious aura. One by one, they charged towards the Holy Sword Emperor. Humph! The latter snorted coldly. A sword appeared in his hand. It seemed alive because it was vibrating violently and he had to exert a lot of strength to keep holding it. Shwa! He slashed the sword straight at the 3rd golden bodhisattva. His attack was almost imperceptible compared to those manifestations. However, when people saw his sword touching one of the manifestations, they found the other manifestation was also cut. Bang! They exploded, becoming countless specks of light that were flung out in various directions. The Holy Sword Emperor finally arrived in front of the 3rd golden bodhisattva and struck him in the chest with the hilt of his sword, causing him to be flung far into the sky. People can't see him anymore. The Holy Sword Emperor then slashed his sword at the stone tower, followed by the purple ocean dragon sending out his huge fist. Various layers of energy appeared around the stone tower, but they quickly disintegrated. Boom! Eventually the stone tower itself shattered, revealing an enormous golden gate. It was surrounded by chains and just looking at it made one feel as if they were looking at a wall so thick that it was impossible to break. Quick back! A gentle voice full of majesty resounded, making the wind on almost the entire continent move towards the temple. Chapter 49 The Buddhas. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A woman's voice. Who is she? Although most people couldn't sense the 3 people hiding behind, they could guess that there was another supreme expert behind the 2, so they were filled with curiosity when they heard that voice. Amitba, friends from the east, why are you attacking us? A majestic voice as if coming from the sky resounded. Immediately after that an enormous Buddha figure appeared, it covered the sky, even the purple ocean dragon was only on par with high head. Even though his face was as if he had already entered his 60s, his body still looked dashing, like a middle-aged man at his peak. Sun Buddha, said the people. When he appeared, people felt 2 more auras as powerful as him moving swiftly from a distance towards that location. Oh, look at that! Someone pointed in the direction the Sun Buddha was staring at. There, they saw the figure of a man in a white robe, standing with his hands behind his back. Facing the Buddha's massive body, he didn't look the least bit intimidated, his feet still where he stood. The Buddha stopped in front of him and said, Eternal Star my brother, you shine more and more like the stars in the night sky, but why did you attack our humble temple? His tone sounded very thoughtful and friendly. If it was aimed at ordinary people, they would definitely think that they had done something wrong and immediately repent. Ding! Wound the Sun Buddha, you will get 4,000 karma points and 1.300 charm points. The mission will stop after 10 times. Kill or capture the Sun Buddha, you will get 80,000 karma points and 26,000 charm points. Qin Yuan smiled, then pointed his hand to the side, making a blocking position. Seeing that, the Sun Buddha sighed. Since you insist, my brother, I can only use the power given to me to protect the sanctity of the Buddha's teachings. After saying that, his hands moved, like someone who was about to meditate or maybe swat a mosquito with 2 hands. Whoosh! Whoosh! His 2 palms headed towards Qin Yuan from the left and right. Space shook and rumbled from their movements. At the same time, red light radiated from the 2 palms, making them appear like the sun. Qin Yuan could feel the extreme heat as they got closer to him. He thought it was enough to burn his skin if he didn't cultivate the immortal diamond body. For now, he chose not to move, just standing still, waiting for the 2 palms to hit his body. While it took time to explain, everything happened in a split second. Bang! There was a loud crashing sound as the 2 palms collided. As a result, the land became broken and many parts were thrown in various directions. When the people realized how terrifying the effect of this fight was, they quickly ran away as if there was a lion behind them. At the same time, the Sun Buddha knitted his brows, something he rarely did. He withdrew his hands and found Qin Yuan still standing quietly. "Brother, you are getting unpredictable," he said. Qin Yuan smiled in response. He stared at the place where the 2 auras were. "Now, they have arrived." He said, "Okay, you two, don't hold back or you won't get through." "Amitba, then you should try my mountain." An answer came from one of the 2 auras. Qin Yuan couldn't help but knit his brows when he heard the voice because it was definitely not the voice of the Golden Buddha. In his memory, the last time he heard that voice, it was full of arrogance. A gigantic figure as large as the Sun Buddha appeared. He is also an old man. Amazingly, he has 6 arms and a pair of white feathered wings. His 6 arms were carrying a mountain. Because his body was already so huge, the mountain he carried was naturally huge, people trembled just thinking about its size. Of course, the experts who knew this man's identity didn't think about that for now. They all wondered why he was here and why his demeanor seemed so different from what they had heard. Moreover, there should have been the word God on his forehead, but it had disappeared. "Eternal Mountain, I can't believe it's you," Qin Yuan said. The same mission as before appeared after he said that. "Sorry brother, just call me Mountain from now on, the word eternal is too much for an old man like me." "Yeah, but Mountain alone is not enough, now you deserve to be called Mountain Buddha," Qin Yuan replied. He was not interested in the reason he changed his path. Even though it was the first time for a saint ancestor, it was not a rare thing overall. "I am honored by your calling," replied the eternal mountain ancestor or mountain Buddha. Whoosh! He then dropped the mountain he was carrying towards Qin Yuan. It actually emitted an extreme pressure, Qin Yuan almost fell out of the air because of it. Phew! He took a deep breath, glanced back briefly before jumping up. Here he needed to put up a fight because the Sky Butterfly Queen and the Sword-Hearted Great Emperor were already ready to unleash their attacks. He didn't want the slightest mistake. Whoosh! 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 He released all of his saint fruits, making his body full of aura radiance. And his aura also became thicker because the 10 saint fruits were gray. Of course, he had already disguised their colors, so no one could see. His staff then appeared in his hand and his power flowed into it. He pointed it at the mountain, trying to block it with it. Bang! Once again a loud crashing sound resounded. Qin Yuan took 3 steps back at that moment. The weight of the mountain made all of his veins bulge. Bang! Bang! Right after that, 2 loud bangs resounded from in front of the Golden Gate as a female figure and a sword appeared there. Chapter 50 A Combination Attack. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Their emergence was like the birth of the world, causing various divine phenomena. People even saw a rainbow of 1,000 colors stretching from east to west, while all who wielded swords found their control over their swords disappearing. Looking at the two figures, many wore doubtful expressions as almost no one recognized them. They could only try to guess by observing their features. Since there were very few existences with the same traits as them and there was only one with such an aura, people quickly deduced who they were. God, this is a great emperor and primordial beast. What exactly are their goals? Do they want to go to war? One eternal saint ancestor might intrigue them, but one primordial beast and one great emperor, teaming up and attacking the Buddhist Holy Land, was something that had truly never happened in history. When the Sky Butterfly Queen appeared, she was pulling her bowstring. The arrow on the bow was clear as diamond so that the ordinary eye could see through it. However, if you looked closely, it turned out to be not metal, but a large amount of condensed wind. Its tip was extremely sharp to the point of causing a spatial tunnel to appear in front of it. Who knows how heavy the bowstring is? To be sure, the veins on the Sky Butterfly Queen's hands and neck seemed to be extremely tight, even sweat dripping from her forehead. Of course, for people, this is a very beautiful sight. They can boast for a lifetime by telling this scene. Let's start, said the Sky Butterfly Queen, glancing at the sword hovering by her side. Whoosh! The sword slid right after the Sky Butterfly Queen spoke. It was extremely fast, producing a blast of wind behind the hilt, like when a rocket was launched. Since the hilt of the sword was facing east, the explosion extended eastward at an unimaginable speed. People quickly lost sight of the explosion because in a split second, it had already reached a very far away place. Only the continuous banging sound echoing in the east let them know that it still didn't stop. Who knows how many mountains were destroyed? Now, the land that the explosion passed through had turned into something like a dry river. Bang! The Sky Butterfly Queen finally let go of her bowstring. Instantly every sound disappeared from the world, causing people to wonder if their ears had gone deaf. Right after that, they found their movements to be extremely slow. Just moving a finger felt as if moving mountains. Time is getting slower. People quickly concluded because they didn't feel anything wrong with their bodies. But it's not the force of time, it's the effect of something moving too fast, a time expert explained. Even he was helpless under that power. The arrow that flew from the Sky Butterfly Queen's bow was indeed too fast. It immediately overtook the sword-hearted Great Emperor even though he made his move first. Whoosh! The two then circled around each other and finally merged, turning into spears. Bang! Their union produced an extremely powerful shockwave. Qin Yuan, who was holding up the mountain with his staff, found the mountain being pushed several kilometers up by the shockwave. So scary, he said in a low voice. This made him wonder if his body could withstand the attack. The Buddhas also wore serious expressions. The combination of attacks of two people who are good at attacking, even the most skilled in defense will definitely get hurt, said the Mountain Buddha. Right after he said that, the combination of attacks finally hit the gate. Boom! It exploded instantly, shattering into countless pieces. Whoosh! The Sky Butterfly Queen then flew into the shattered gate. She pulled the Purple Ocean Dragon and the Holy Sword Emperor with her. At the same time, the sword body of the sword-hearted Great Emperor flew into the sky, to be more precise towards that mountain. Shwa! It easily pierced through the mountain, appeared in front of the Mountain Buddha and continued to slide into his chest. Seeing that, the Mountain Buddha combined his 6 palms to block the sword. However, he quickly jumped backwards because in just a split second, the sword managed to pierce through 3 of his palms. Amazing, is this the power of a great emperor? People showed expressions of admiration. There is no need to argue, the great emperor is definitely stronger, and this one is one of the most powerful. I am afraid that no eternal saint ancestor can fight him. Qin Yuan turned his gaze downwards as he saw a wisp of golden light hurtling towards the gate. Without thinking, he chased after the wisp of light. Within that wisp of light, was an old man. His body was small and thin, but he always sat in a meditative position even though his body was moving at high speed. While chasing after him, Qin Yuan pointed his staff at him. Stars appeared around him and hurtled towards him. Before the stars hit him, a gigantic golden wall suddenly appeared behind him. It blocked the stars. Boom! 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 The stars finally exploded, punching countless holes in the wall. The effects of the explosion still managed to hit the golden Buddha. Its movement stopped for a moment and Qin Yuan was finally able to catch up with it. He arrived at his side, then swung his staff at him, to which he responded by sending a palm out. Bon! The collision of the two sent Qin Yuan and the golden Buddha thrown a few steps back. Right after that, the sword-hearted Great Emperor appeared by Qin Yuan's side while the Sun Buddha and Mountain Buddha appeared behind the golden Buddha. At this moment, the Mountain Buddha's body shrank, 4 of his 6 arms disappeared along with his wings. He looks normal now. Amitabha, we can't get past you too, said the Sun Buddha. Instead of doing more damage, wouldn't it be better for you guys to stop first? Qin Yuan replied with a faint smile as he looked around. Previously the land around the temple was full of lush trees, very beautiful to see from anywhere. But now, there was nothing but destruction, something Qin Yuan only realized now. The bodhisattvas were there, protecting people from the effects. Good thing they've only used a few attacks and haven't moved from the temple.